If you are an IT support professional or run your company's service desk in charge of Active Directory updates, most often, these updates arrive in the form of support tickets, emails, electronic or paper forms. Your HR department will hire a new employee or terminate an existing one, or change employee profiles such as title, department, phone number, or address, and generally, the expectation is that all IT systems will be updated accordingly, including Active Directory. As such, the process is generally inefficient, tedious, and mostly error-prone. What I want to show you today is a solution that can easily automate this task. Using AD Linked, you can set up connections between your source data, Cloud HR, CSV files, or SQL databases and your Active Directory. AD Linked will process user provisioning, deprovisioning, and profile updates automatically within set intervals, essentially making the HR data source the single source of truth. You'll find a link down here from which you can download it for free and try it out for yourself. I will go through the steps necessary to create a simple connection job and synchronize some sample data that I have prepared. Before we begin, for this application to work efficiently, you will need to designate a key field that relates records from your HR source data file to your user objects in AD, establishing a one-to-one relationship. Generally, employee ID is the most common attribute used in this case. If you have your employee IDs already populated in your Active Directory, great, otherwise you must think of a way of doing this and populating your employee IDs in Active Directory so that you can do a proper synchronization. You may use AD Link to accomplish this task. You can key off of another field, possibly email address, to populate employee IDs in Active Directory, prior to a full implementation of AD Linked. I have installed AD Linked and it's ready for us to create our first connection. What I'm going to do today is to show you how to connect a CSV file to sync some of its data with AD. I have a CSV file that contains 500 rows of sample employee data. It includes columns like employee ID, first name, last name, gender, title, department, status, etc., your average employee data that you would be getting from your HR system. I also went ahead and created a container called New Users in my Active Directory, and it's empty as you can see. What I'm going to do is create a new connection by clicking the New button, and a wizard pops up which allows me to select the type of connection that I am trying to make. I select CSV file from the drop-down menu. Of course, it will ask for the location of the CSV file, which I can simply browse and select here. This is my sample data file. It will require you to verify the location of the file before clicking Next, which I will do here. On the next screen you will have to enter your Active Directory credentials, whatever credentials you will be using for this connection to connect to AD, and make the additions and updates. So here I'll enter my domain controller's server name, a username, and my password. I must verify this connection before I can proceed. Next you have a table that you will use to map your attributes. On the left side you see a source field. These are the columns that AD Link just retrieved from your CSV file. So, I am going to select certain fields that I want to synchronize on a regular basis from this CSV file. I'll start with the first name and last name. If you want to create new users in AD, you must have a first name and last name for the new user object, so I will do that first and then map to corresponding AD attribute and add to my list here. After the first name and last name I will select title and map to job title. Then I will go ahead and select department and maybe phone number. Now, another thing we can do here is to set the default value for this mapping. Setting a default value for the phone number mapping is useful so that when an employee doesn't have a phone number in the source file, its phone number attribute will be set to a general company number. So, in this case we will set it to 55599988877. Next, I will pick city and add it to the list, then perhaps state. That's good enough for our demo purpose. I'll click next, and on the next screen you can decide if you want AD link to create new users for you in Active Directory. If it is unchecked, of course, it will not create any new users. In this case, I want this option and will check it. You will be presented with new options where you can select your logon name format from one of the available ones. In this case, I'm happy with first name initial and last name. Set the default password for new users and have them change at the next logon, options that you are probably familiar with from your Active Directory interactions. Then I am going to pick my new users container that I created earlier. Click next and you can have users disabled based on one of the fields that is retrieved from the source data. So, in this case, if you want any employee with the status field of terminated to be disabled, this is how you would set it. I'm not going to do that at this time. I am going to simply create all my users first. An important thing to be mindful of is having a key field in order to make a one-to-one relationship between your source data and Active Directory. This would be a unique value in your data source, like the employee ID. What will happen here is that if AD link doesn't find an employee ID it reads from the source in Active Directory, it will then create a new user, and if it finds it, then it will simply update it according to the mapping table set up earlier. If you have Softaira's ADAXes installed and configured, you can enable this feature to have AD linked make all the updates through ADAXes, taking advantage of its powerful automation engine. I will not get into this here, perhaps in future videos. All you have to do is enable and provide your ADAX's server name and appropriate credentials. Next, you can set the time interval between each run, how often this connection will run. In my case, I'll set it to 30 minutes. Then specify how many users you want to process each time. If you are testing this, maybe you want to set it to 5 users initially and then change to all later when everything is to your liking. I'm going to set it to 5 users just for our demo purposes here. Last option here allows you to get a table view of the source data. This is the CSV file in the viewer. A clean grid table format that you can inspect the source data. Here you can also set a filter. As you can see, I have 500 rows in this table that I will filter based on the status field being equal to active, to sync only active users within this table on my first run. As you can see, it filtered all rows with status being active. Now we have a list of 245 employees to work with. I will save this filter, click Finish. AD Linked will save the connection and ask if I want to restart its service so that the new connection will take effect. I will not do that. As you can see, the connection was created with the specified parameters. Now, what I'm going to do is show you what happens when I run it. Of course, if I just enabled this connection, AD Link service that runs in the background will process it on the next run, but I can just run it from the control panel. I'll go ahead and do that, and we'll see what happens. So, obviously this was quick because there were only 5 users that had probably created. If I refresh the AD container, we can see that 5 users were added to this container. Let's manually change an employee's title in the source file and see what happens. I will change Brent's job title here to Software Engineer. Save the CSV file. Pretend like this was updated by the HR department. I will go and then edit this connection and change the number of users to process to 10 and run the connection again. After processing, if I refresh the container, I can see that 5 more users were added, while it also updated Brent Chambers' job title. We can also review AD Link's log here, which will show us all the additions and updates. As you can see, 10 users were created, and 1 was updated. Next step here would be to edit this connection and change the number of users to process and set it to 0, which means it will process all employees. I may also check the Disable Users checkbox to have employees with terminated status disabled in AD. I'll save the connection and enable it to have it run every 30 minutes to update my Active Directory with new information. Of course, we used a CSV file for this video, but you can also create a SQL database connection or connect to cloud HRMS systems such as ADP Workforce Now, Bamboo HR, and Exponent HR at this time. Hope you find this video helpful. I will be making more videos using other connections, so stay tuned.